Now let's talk about categories of direct procurement, and we're going to start with number one because there are three. So we have production material, we have commodity procurement, and we have goods for resale. So production material. The materials used for production are typically going to be categorized as three. You're talking about raw materials, components and assemblies, and work in progress. Raw materials, when we talk about raw materials, what are we talking about? These are mostly sold to the manufacturer in an unprocessed state. For instance, ores, petroleum, fruits, etc. And regarding components and assemblies, these are other manufacturers' finished outputs which a buying organization buys so that it can incorporate into its products. For example, buying microchips to assemble into computers. And the third one is working in progress. Now, working in progress is interesting because this refers to outputs partly finished, hence not ready for sale to the customer. So that's the thing. Now, with those three, okay, as part of your production material, there are certain things to have in your mind when you're thinking about these things. Number one, the make or buy decision. At some point, you're going to have to decide as an organization, is it cheap for us? Is it effective for us to make these things in-house? Or is it just better if we outsource that, if we had somebody else do it for us and then we just pay for that? So that is the make or the buy decision. You need to know the extent to which you can manufacture internally or outsource. As a business, it could just make sense for you to outsource some stuff, okay? But, as opposed to making them internally. But there are aspects that also just make sense if you do them internally. For instance, being able to control the quality of the result makes it important for you to actually be in charge of whatever it is that you're making. So yeah, that's one of those things that you sit with your accountant and your production manager and your quality, whatever it is, and then you come up with a decision. Do we make this thing here or do we outsource? Take something like iPhones, okay? It kind of makes financial sense for Apple to actually design the things in America and then outsource them to China, okay? Basically, it kind of just makes sense that way, financially, which I'm guessing has something to do with the cost of production, labor, and all that stuff. Number two, the need for cross-functional collaboration within departments. Again, as part of your production, you have to understand that because when you're talking about things like quality, all departments have to be on board. Otherwise, if one department, if you're just buying things and then one department is busy making those things, the design department comes up with the design without consulting the engineering or the production department. And then you end up with things which can't actually be manufactured. And you already spent money in buying the resources needed for those things to be produced. That is important for you to factor in. Number three, the need to involve potential suppliers early so that you can take advantage of supply chain expertise. Now let's move on to the second one. Let's talk about commodity procurement. Now, commodities occur in nature. They provide raw materials for businesses to incorporate into their production. We're talking about things like ore, coal, tea, cotton. Now, the one thing you have to understand about commodity procurement is that since you've said that they occur naturally, okay, in a given environment, you can get them locally. But then the problem is in the area that you exist in, which commodities do exist. And so that kind of just creates demand for international sourcing for these kind of things. And so you end up having commodity exchange markets. And so an equal distribution of these items in geographical location will mean that at some point you're going to have to deal with international sourcing. And that in itself will come with other risks. I'm talking about things like exchange rate, transport risk, legal issues, and also prices are not necessarily stable because such things can be affected by weather, okay? Political stability. If you're trying to, if you are dealing with something like coffee, okay? And you're getting it from a certain country and that country has fights or whatever it is, now that creates a problem to you. And so that's the thing you have to understand about commodity procurement. But the point is, as part of the procurement, these are things that you deal with on a daily basis. So you not only have to understand buying and selling, you also have to understand such kind of factors that can affect the market. Now, number three, goods for resale. When you're in a business such as a retail business, okay, brokerage, or even wholesale, you are basically purchasing things and then reselling them. And so you're not really adding a lot of value to these things. And well, it's not really an easy gig as it sounds, because there are things you still need to worry about. Here are the key distinctive features of procurement of goods for resale according to Ian Van Weel, Purchasing Management, Analysis, Planning, and Practice. Number 1, bottom line thinking. So when you're in that business, when you're procuring for such, you always have to think about profit. Because as I pointed out earlier, since you're not really doing much value addition, so you have to look at the kind of products that are going to have a high margin if you sell them. Because that's just the only thing that you're doing. You're taking product here and reselling them. So you best deal with products with high margin. Number 2, there are a wide range of goods from different manufacturers or retailers availed by the wholesaler or retailers, and so buyers may have a hard time when focusing on quality, prices, or terms and conditions. Number 3, retailers and wholesalers generally know what is available in the market, and so there is not really going to be much of long-term dealing here. We simply sell what is available and we simply sell what is in demand. So these are not the kind of procurements that will call for long-term contracts, okay, or long-term relationship with your suppliers. Next, buying and reselling tend to be a quick process, which means you have to stay on top of things, okay? Communication here is key. If someone is going to order something from your website, you can't afford to delay, because you see, they're not just ordering from your website, or the fact that they did order from your website doesn't mean that your website is the only one in existence. They can go to another website and do the same thing. So, quick communication. And finally, the technical complexity is low in retail purchasing. But that is not the same when purchasing for industrial use, because in this case, the procurement officer must have technical know-how of what they are buying. So we've looked at categories of direct procurement, talking about production material, resale, goods for resale, and we've also talked about commodities, right? So under indirect procurement, what are the various categories that we have there? And these will be MRO, that is maintenance, repair, and operating supplies.